I'm not sure how to structure this video. If you're watching and this sentence has made it into the final recording, it means that I'm still not sure. But being unsure is often the first step to being pleasantly surprised. So I'm going to try my best to have what I think is an important discussion about loving what hurts us. Somewhere along the way, you'll also hear a spirited defense of a video game released in 1987 that most today have dismissed as flawed, confusing, and frustrating. And that game is all of those things. But it's also wonderful. I've played Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link, more than I've played any other game in the Zelda series, and my continued repetition is what got me to making this video. These days, there are so many more advanced and more rewarding games to play than Zelda 2. Why is it, out of all the better games available, I still choose to play this one at the end of a long day? We could dismiss this question by casting aspersions on my judgment, but I think there might be something deeper going on here. Maybe the game is just a game, and maybe it's more than that to me. Look, I've got a doctorate in clinical psychology, okay? Let me have this. Being curious is kind of what we do. Recently, I've been reviewing literature on a psychological concept which Freud coined the compulsion to repeat, and this has been a great jumping off point to explore why I keep returning to Zelda 2. As psychoanalyst Jared Russell writes, "In the present, we repeat and therefore represent our past. In the act of recounting the past, we represent the present." As I've explored my affinity for Zelda 2, I have found both of these statements to be true. The past is the past, until it isn't anymore. Come with me as I get to the bottom of why Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link, a flawed, confusing, and frustrating game, has enthralled me for so long. First things first, this game has its share of detractors. I'm not making this video to try and argue that Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link, is the greatest game in the series. It was released decades ago, at a time when the Zelda series as we know it didn't even exist. So when someone says that this game broke the Zelda formula, they're saying something untrue, because when it came out, there was only one prior game from which to draw comparisons. There was no established formula to break yet, and if you're willing to look for them, there are actually lots of similarities between Zelda 2 and the original Zelda. For all its mechanical differences, the spirit of this game is the same as its predecessor. You, as Link, are dropped into the game with no instruction or guidance as to where to go. You're on an adventure. You'll need to explore, defeat enemies, collect items, and you are rewarded for doing so. But that's about where the similarities end. Much has been said about Zelda 2's steep, sometimes unforgiving learning curve, and it is here that the differences between this game and Zelda 1 are most obvious. First, gone is the traditional top-down combat perspective present in the first game, which returned in all 2D Zelda titles thereafter. Instead, all exploration outside of the world map has shifted to a side-scrolling perspective, more common to a Metroid or a Castlevania game. This is a seemingly small change, but it creates far-reaching effects on gameplay. In the top-down view, for example, the player has much more freedom of choice when it comes to engaging with enemies on the screen. You've got space enough to move around, and can attack the enemy on your own time. Or heck, in many cases the player can just continue on their way if they happen to be low on hearts in a dungeon and don't want to risk further injury. It's a nice system, it's kind. It leaves you with enough mental bandwidth to focus on where you are, where you need to go, and whether or not you're on the right track to get there. It's like being at a chill job, you know? The one where you've got a long-term goal, you've got a basic idea of how to achieve that goal, and your boss is trusting enough to let you develop your own pace and approach to get there. That's the top-down view, right? Zelda 2's side-scrolling perspective is like having a job at a failing startup, where everything is somehow top priority. You've got emails coming in at 3:40 a.m. and hey, I really need you to kill these iron knuckles or we're not going to be able to complete the keynote for next quarter. So I'm going to need everyone to stay late now. And where are you at finding the dungeon item, buddy? I need an update on that now. But I'm also putting you in charge of this new enemy stream we've got coming down the pipeline. It's fine, don't worry about it. They'll just spawn forever and ever, and if you get hit, you'll lose the precious experience you've been trading your life for. Why haven't you gotten that crystal place? You want a map? You want a fucking map? I want a fucking Lambo and employees who know how to keep their track of their own fucking progress without defeat to boss Link. I'm starting to have my doubts. The employee we need is 2 Adventure of Link Corp. How is your start only level 4? I thought we Okay. Okay, that might not make it to the final take. Basically, in other 2D Zelda titles, enemies serve as stepping stones, as reminders that you know how combat works. In this game, enemies exist as reminders of how much you still need to learn about combat. And in many rooms, you've got such a small area to work with that if you try to jump over them, you'll end up taking the damage you were trying to avoid anyway, so you might as well get to stabbing and hope for the best. Let's talk about the stabbing though. Can we talk about the stabbing for a minute? Because I think it's amazing. Link's dinky little sword jabs are the foundation on which all of its other game mechanics rest. As a design element, they are simple, but provide the player with several tactical choices which a top-down perspective never could. Chief among these choices is the ability to attack an enemy high or low with your sword. Some enemies are too short to be attacked while standing, and therefore must be dealt with from a crouch. Other enemies have a moving shield which determines their vulnerability, like the aforementioned Iron Knuckles. In fact, these guys are like my favorite fights in the game, and they highlight what I think is so special about Zelda 2's combat in general, so let's talk about why. This is an Iron Knuckle. They come in different colors and levels of strength, but they all fight in generally the same way. While fighting an Iron Knuckle, it will move its shield up and down while it swings its sword at you, and the player is tasked with determining whether to attack this enemy from a standing or a crouched position. If you manage to strike around the shield position, congratulations, it's a hit. If this was all that combat in Zelda 2 had to offer, it would be an adequate, if uninspiring, take on 2D sword fighting. But this game has a final twist, which, combined with your ability to direct attacks, turns combat into a tight, never secure game of risk and reward. You may have already noticed in the previous clips with the Iron Knuckles, but take a look at how these guys attack you. Can you see it? Just like Link can attack high and low, so can they. But their attack is decoupled from their shield position, which is something that Link cannot do. In combat, Link often needs to position his own shield in such a way as it blocks his enemy's strikes. He has a range disadvantage most of the time, which means trying to attack a vulnerable spot when an attack is also coming from that spot will leave him taking damage. So combat becomes a game of tracking two variables at once. Where's my enemy's weak point, and where's the attack coming from? I might really want to attack my enemy's face because I see the shield down at his feet, but if I do that, my legs are going to be cut to ribbons because that's where the sword is coming from now. So I crouch to block the attack, and I'm forced to hit his shield to knock the guy back a couple of paces, while I regroup and keep watching for that golden strike opportunity. And even though Link has a range disadvantage, he does have an advantage when it comes to speed. His aforementioned dinky sword jabs are often faster than an enemy's, which require a wind-up. So if I can poke my enemy and stagger him, it can open up opportunities for well-timed combos, where I can get a kill by timing my stabs to beat the enemy's wind-up. Ideally, you want to get a hit on an enemy as soon as you can to start this process, but battles can take quite some time, with give and take on both sides as you each attempt to use positioning and intelligent aggression to gain the upper hand. It's the only Zelda game I've played where fights feel like, well, fights, and you're not just spamming an attack into a vulnerable enemy until it dies. I've primarily used Iron Knuckles as an example here because they're among my favorite enemies, but the game does a great job of keeping fights fresh and interesting. Once you've got one aspect of fighting down, you'll likely encounter another enemy with a different movement pattern, or he's got projectile attacks now, or he's more armored, or you know what, yeah, now he can just jump the entire length of the screen while shooting projectiles, and his only reliable weakness is to time a jump attack underneath him like 6 times in a row. It's an easy combat system to understand, but a hard one to master, is what I'm saying. And in a lot of other games, that's seen as a good thing. Can fights be challenging, frustrating, sometimes heart-poundingly stressful affairs? Well, yeah. But Dark Souls was like that too. And in that game, Speaking of Dark Souls, that game had RPG mechanics which were seen as arcane and occasionally difficult to understand. Wouldn't you know it, Zelda 2 has something similar going on. Let's talk about it. Assuming you've got a decent handle on combat and can destroy an enemy, you'll notice that you gain experience points afterwards. The points accrue towards advancing Link's life, magic, or attack level, whichever requires the least amount of experience points relative to the others. For those who haven't played the game, or for those who never understood how leveling works, here's how these stats impact gameplay. Life is the least expensive stat to level up at the start of the game, and new players will be tempted to pump this one up as soon as they can. They shouldn't, for reasons I'll get into later, but I can see why the desire to do so would be there. The life stat determines how many hit points each one of Link's heart containers holds. You start with 16 points per container at level 1, and 128 points per container level 8, which is the maximum. However, you as the player will never see the quantity of hit points within each heart container, so life essentially functions as a defense increase as far as gameplay is concerned. Before you leveled up, this attack took away half of a heart container. Now it only takes away a quarter. Progress! I'm stronger now. Additionally, each time you choose to increase your life level, your heart containers will return to full power, allowing you access to the range-increasing beam sword, which can be a big help during fights when spacing is important. Also, leveling up your life can be a sneaky way to replenish your hit points in the event that you're in a dungeon and your magic meter is empty. Magic? Oh yeah, I haven't mentioned it yet, but the second of Link's stats in Zelda 2 is his magic ability. Unlike other titles, where certain items drain a magic meter, in Zelda 2, Link will learn several distinct spells over the course of his adventure, each with their own casting cost. Upgrading magic works similarly to upgrading life, with a couple of important differences. Unlike with heart containers, your magic containers will always contain the same amount of magic points regardless of what level you're at. What then changes when you level a stat up? The casting cost of each of Link's multiple spells. Take, for example, Link's basic jump spell. Casting this spell will allow Link to jump twice as high as he normally does, which opens up lots of options for combat and for traversing rooms. At magic level 1, casting this spell will cost Link 48 magic points. With magic containers always holding a standard 16 points and starting the game off with 4 containers, casting the jump spell will burn through 3/4 of all your available magic. And since each spell only lasts for one room before needing to be recast, you can see how a player with level 1 magic could quickly run out and become frustrated. But advance that magic level to its level 8 maximum, that same jump spell will cost just 8 points to cast, or half of a single magic container. Now, the rate at which spells decrease in cost is not consistent, so don't expect that kind of reduction for the really helpful spells like Life or Thunder. But still, upgrading this skill does fill your magic meter, and with careful use of item drops, you should always have enough magic to do what you need to do. If you're not being wasteful, that is. That's magic. Let's talk about the attack skill, the most expensive to advance, as well as my personal favorite to advance. The attack stat does just what it says it does. It increases Link's damage output each time you choose to advance it. But wait, there's more. The amount that each level increases Link's attack is not linear. The higher level you get, the more your damage output increases. ZeldaDungeon.net, which I've used since like 2010 and for whose existence I will always be thankful, says that each level up increases Link's damage by 50% of the previous level, and that is roughly true based on the damage chart they provide. Going from level 1 to 2, for example, will increase your damage from 8 to 12, which is a true 50% increase. But going from level 2 to 3 only brings it from 12 to 16, when a true 50% increase would land you at 18 points of damage per hit. It's not a huge issue either way, and whenever I play I'm not thinking about things at that level of granularity. What's important to remember is that the more you level up attack, the more payoff you'll be seeing throughout the game. However, complicating this is that attack is the most expensive skill to level up by a wide margin, so if you want to see the benefits of leveling it up, you're going to want to commit to some efficiency there. Or maybe you just put it on the back burner, right? You might be under the impression that it's better to level up magic and life first. It's nice to have magic and health heals, right? I'd forgive you for making that kind of logical deduction, but if you do that, you'll be f***ed. See, I'm not Zelda 2. My forgiveness means nothing, and Zelda 2 cares nothing for what you think might be a good idea at the time. If you level up magic and life before attack, all it will mean is that your inevitable deaths due to your weakness will take slightly longer than they otherwise would have. If you want to enjoy this game, you'll need to be boosting that attack skill as soon as possible. Here's how to do that. Every time you reach the threshold for a level, you're taken to this menu. On it, you can see how much experience points it will take to level up each of your skills, not just the one you currently have the points for. Doing this allows you to see that, for example, you might have the points to level up your magic, but an attack upgrade is a mere 100 points further down the road. There's no need to upgrade magic now, because all of our containers are full, and no spell is so prohibitively expensive that we can't just roll with the cost we've got. All a magic upgrade would do now is burn our experience points and start us at square one with little tangible benefit. But that attack upgrade? Those are always valuable. See that cancel option at the top of the menu? Selecting that will roll your experience points over towards the next most expensive level up, essentially putting them towards the skill you were really interested in the entire time. At this point, you might be thinking, so what? The game lets me roll over XP. So that means I'll just always roll over XP to efficiently allot points to the hardest to advance skills. How is this a strategic or elegant choice to make? It just makes itself. But Zelda 2 has one more game design element, which sets it apart from the other titles in the series, and it synergizes with everything I've already been explaining. This last piece is the secret sauce that ties the whole dish together. Often misunderstood and maligned as a cheap difficulty wall, it is actually the key to all your strategic decisions in your playthrough. Understand this one element, and the game's potential will open up before you. Ignore it, and you'll find yourself just another face in the crowd of haters who call this game a failed misstep in an otherwise solid franchise. I am, of course, talking about lives and game overs. Lives and game overs. In my Zelda game, that's a Mario thing. It's preposterous. It serves no function other than to pad out the overall playtime. Why do I always start back at the temple? They put lives and game overs in my water supply and it poisoned my fam. Okay, I get it. The choice to give a set amount of lives before being transported to a game over screen where you're mocked by Ganon's 8-bit laughter and forced to start all the way back at the game's opening room has become a controversial one in hindsight. For many players, especially new or inexperienced ones, being thrown halfway across the map and potentially wasting hours of gameplay progress might have felt like a torturous penalty. And don't get me wrong, it is. It's probably the reason why this game remains so divisive. No one likes being told they're not good enough, and to lose hard-fought progress besides. But there's another way. What if I told you that in Zelda 2, game over screens were inevitable, but frustration at game over screens was not? What if, with each life, you were able to make a bet on your own skill? A bet so rewarding that all you'd think at those game over screens was, nice, that was a good set of lives. Does it sound impossible? Too good to be true? Not for someone who understands the leveling system, and by now, dear viewer, you do. It works like this. Upon each game over screen, all unspent experience points are lost and set to 0. But all your completed level ups are saved. This means that the cool rollover strategy to efficiently level up more expensive stats is safest to use at the start of a run, when the player has all of their lives to devote to hitting that more expensive stat. Canceling a cheaper level to shoot for a higher one is a commitment. You can't uncancel your choice until you hit the new experience benchmark. This means that choosing when and why to roll your points over to the next stat becomes exciting, where you need to weigh your desire to see the more expensive stat leveled up against your ability to actually, get the points required without running out of lives. If you're on your last life, with 2 heart containers left, and a 1,000-point gap between now and your next most expensive skill, it might just be better to take the cheaper life upgrade, press onward, try to snag a dungeon item or a magic refill, and put efficient XP allocation on the back burner for a bit. You're on your last life, in a game where it is notoriously easy to die. Best use your remaining life to lock in everything you can. But maybe the gap is just 200 points in an otherwise identical situation. I mean, that's only a couple of iron knuckles. I've got enough magic for a shield spell. I really want that attack upgrade. You know what? Screw it. Let's go for it. And now, you brave adventurer you, the thrill of Zelda 2 has begun. Because by committing to that level up on your last life, you're essentially going for broke. If you succeed in your battles, you get to squeeze out one more coveted attack upgrade, which will make all subsequent battles easier. But should you fail, you'll not only not get that attack upgrade, you'll hit that game over screen with the shame of knowing that you're also down the less costly upgrade you already had the XP for. All because of that punishing game over screen. One that erases experience points, but saves level ups. Separately, the RPG elements, the brutal difficulty, and having a finite set of lives could all be criticized, and they have been. But for the player who can see them functioning together, the game turns into something special. How good do you think you are? How good are you really? Can you prove it? Zelda 2 wants to know. What becomes apparent as you dig deeper into the game mechanics is that Zelda 2 presents the player with a tightly constructed set of constraints, each in symbiosis with the others. If you change any one of them, the gestalt of a playthrough would be fundamentally altered. And critically, if the player ignores their interrelationship, their experience of the game will likewise diminish. That all said, mechanics alone are only half of the picture here, and are far from the only part of the game which has garnered scorn. Let's talk about this game's story, and how it progresses. In order to understand the story of Zelda 2, you'll need to be in possession of something that I'm sure almost no one who has played it has. The game's instruction manual. Wait, don't go. I'm not about to go on a boomer tangent about how games were better when they came with a translated instruction booklet. I'm just saying that for this game in particular, a little supplementary reading will go a long way. But you didn't come to YouTube to read. I mean, I certainly don't. I come to YouTube to relinquish the crushing weight of knowing I exist. So let me summarize for you, since I did manage to track down a digital copy of the game's manual. Basically, there was once a strong and powerful king of Hyrule who was able to use all 3 parts of the Triforce, power, wisdom, and courage, to rule benevolently and usher in a golden age. However, neither of his heirs, one unnamed prince and one princess named Zelda, were worthy enough to wield the complete Triforce. So before the good king died, he sealed the Triforce of Courage away, waiting for a worthy hero to find it. Meanwhile, the king's deadbeat prince's son has an inkling that his sister Zelda might have been told the whereabouts of the Triforce of Courage by the king before he died. So the prince and his wizard friend confront Zelda, who refuses to reveal anything to either of them. In a rage, the wizard puts such a powerful sleep spell on Zelda that it kills him in the process and puts Zelda into an endless sleep, only to awaken when the Triforce of Courage is found and the prince's wish can presumably be satisfied. Only the prince himself kind of got cold feet about the whole attacking his sister for information thing, and he feels just terrible about what happened to Zelda. So he seals her behind the ominously titled Door That Does Not Open, and decreed that every subsequent girl born in the royal family be called Zelda in remembrance of the tragedy, and the prince's feelings of guilt. Okay, you get all that? All of that happened and implied centuries before the game takes place. Now, with only 2 Triforces available, Hyrule has entered a period of steady decline and decadence, its borders shrinking, the royal family weakening, and things just generally not being great. In fact, that's why Ganon was allowed to surface and come to power in the previous game, which required the Triforce of Wisdom to be broken up into 8 pieces, which then Link found, and you know what? It doesn't matter. This is spinning out too much. I've gone too far. I've gone too far. The point is, in this game, our hero Link notices that on his 16th birthday, he has a weird triangle mark appear on the back of his hand. And what do you know? It lets him open the door which does not open to see the sleeping Zelda from Hyrule's golden age centuries before. Impa then takes Link into the room and says that this must mean he's the chosen one and all that good stuff, and she gives him a scroll and 6 crystals left behind by the good old king who held all 3 Triforces. The scroll lets Link know that the king has hidden the Triforce of Courage inside the Great Palace at the end of the Valley of Death, and, what's more, that it has been sealed away by a binding force, which will destroy anyone who comes in contact with it. The only way to dispel the binding force is to take the 6 crystals and place them into the statues within various temples around Hyrule. However, don't think that it's going to be easy, Link, because the king also filled those temples with guardians and creatures to protect them from an invasion. As a side note, isn't that kinda cool? The hardest enemies in this game aren't from Ganon, but were guardians created by the king's magic. So what Link has to do is first hit up all the temples, defeat the guardians, place the crystals in their proper places, and then make his way to the Valley of Death, where he can dispel the binding force, defeat the final temple guardian, regain the Triforce of Courage, and allow Hyrule to restore itself to its former glory. That's it. There's nothing else. Wait, then why does the game over screen say Return of Ganon on it then? You mean there's more to this story? Oh yeah, there's much more in fact. See, in addition to the temple guardians Link needs to fight, the remaining forces of Ganon are roving all around the diminished kingdom of Hyrule, looking to find and kill Link. This is because they've kept the ashes of Ganon from the previous game and require Link's blood to bring the big baddie back. So, complicating Link's crystalline quest is the fact that anytime he steps off the road, hordes of swarming monsters are looking to kill him for his blood. And there, that is the story of Zelda 2, as succinctly put as I can make it. Why did I take the time to explain all of this? Well, I think it adds to the richness of the game experience when you have some lore and context behind your actions. And also because the game itself doesn't do a great job of doing it. This is the part of the video where I address what I think are legitimate criticisms of the game. I myself have found a way to love the experience Zelda 2 provides, but I'm also aware that getting to this point took some serious effort on my part, and not everyone is willing to wade through the frankly opaque signposting this game has to get the player to progress. As an example of this, let's put ourselves in the hypothetical shoes of a completely new player, one who has no experience with the game and additionally lacks the benefit of knowing how the leveling system works. What would a player in this position likely do? Well, it would probably go something like this. Okay, here I am on the path and whoa, what are all these guys surrounding me? Oh, well, I guess I'm in another place now. Do I jump on the guy? No, okay, hey, what happens if I go into this cave over here? Oh, I can't see a thing. I guess I'm not supposed to go that way yet. Maybe I'll just follow the path. Oh, hey, it's a town. Wow, this text scrolls like really slowly. Do they expect me to talk to everyone like this? Okay then, let's get to it. Get candle in Parappa Palace, go west. Huh. Okay, I guess I'll go west then. Wait, this isn't a palace. This is another cave. Oh, and this one's really dark too. Oh wow, and there's enemies here. Okay, this clearly is not right. But they said to go west. Maybe I'll follow the path again. Oh hey, it's another town. See, the problem here is that when the NPC tells a new player to go west, he was saying to first get the candle in Parappa Palace, then go west. You're actually meant to go all the way up and through that first dark cave in the northeast to get to the desert and complete the first temple, but the actual gameplay does very little to aid the player in getting there. Of course, eventually, and perhaps after many game overs, the new player would make their way to the desert, then the temple, and finally to the candle. I think the point of this archaic routing is to encourage exploration and give the player some practice with combat and gaining experience, but the execution is lacking. Remember, this is all before the first temple in the game, where things are supposed to be at their easiest. The game gets more cryptic. I haven't even gotten to my good friend Bagu yet, or the girl's lost mirror, or the hidden town of Katsudo. Now those were progression beats that were frustrating to find without a guide, let me tell you. But that's the other side to all these criticisms, isn't it? There are walkthroughs and guides available for free now. No more needing to pay 25 cents a minute to the Nintendo Tips hotline on your parents' landline to do so. We have technology. To the interested player, there are ample opportunities to figure out where to go next without relying on the game's admittedly sparse advice. Without some help, you'll be forced to die, and die again until you get it right. And given the game's harsh penalty for getting a game over, I don't begrudge anyone for throwing in the towel. But for me, this game's cruelty was nothing I hadn't dealt with before. It was just another dangerous and unpredictable situation I'd gotten myself into. Just another authority figure who didn't want to help me and didn't care if I made it through. It was comforting in a familiar kind of way. The game allowed me to recreate the feeling of being in a high-pressure environment and accomplish something, even though the stakes were not nearly as high as I'd been through in the past. After all, what's a cackling Ganon to the horrors real life can throw at you? For those of you who came to this video for some Zelda 2 facts, tips, and tricks, thanks for watching. But for those of you who came to my channel for the Psy in Side Quest, it's time to talk about why it is this game I have been driven to complete over and over again. Examining my own behavior and experience has been a rewarding process for me. And maybe as you watch on to see how this game taught me about who I was, you'll learn something about you, too. So let's strap in and descend into the unconscious. Let's look at the things which comfort us, the things which empower us, or even the things which hurt us, and explore why we're compelled to repeat them. Why do I keep playing this game, and why do I need you to love it? Sigmund Freud wrote about what he called the compulsion to repeat as a way of reconciling what to him were problems of explaining actions through the lens of the pleasure principle, a theory which states that most of the ego's functioning could be traced to the alleviation of psychic discomfort and the production of pleasure. The pleasure principle tended to do a good job explaining most behaviors we might engage in, even those which we repeat. If it feels good after all, we are incentivized to repeat the behavior. However, Freud soon became aware that some behaviors of his patients undergoing psychoanalysis, and also observed in non-neurotic quote-unquote healthy individuals, were repeated, and that these repetitions were disconnected from the production of pleasure of any kind. These outlier behaviors drove Freud to examine whether or not some actions existed beyond the pleasure principle, and had at their root another drive entirely. What were these repeated behaviors which Freud observed in opposition to the pleasure principle? To start, he tells the story of a young child he observed at play. Ernst, as Freud called the boy, seemed compelled to repeat and reenact his mother's daily separation from him in his play, an event which produced in him great psychic distress. He would frequently make his toys gone from all outside observers, in a way which mirrored his own mother's goneness from him when she left for work each morning. What was happening here? Freud brainstormed several explanations for this behavior, but his conclusion was that this was an example of behavior which could not be explained by the pleasure principle. Baby Ernst was repeating, in play, an event which never produced pleasure, and could not even be explained in terms of attaining a kind of sublimated or indirect pleasure. What was going on here? We do not always repeat experiences for their pleasure. Sometimes our behavior, especially repeated behavior, stems from another source. But what might this source be? If we are motivated by the pursuit of pleasure in most aspects of our lives, what is the cause of repeated behavior which appears to produce no pleasure? Why, for example, am I drawn to repeat Zelda 2, despite the fact that, even understanding its mechanics, the game is often anxiety-provoking, frustrating, and, if I'm being honest with myself, unpleasurable? Psychodynamic psychologist Daniel Benveniste summarizes the repetition compulsion beautifully in an address given to the Carter Jenkins Center. He argued that when it comes to repeated, unpleasurable acts, that humans are often, quote, relationships looking for an other, and experiences looking for an event, end quote. His complete lecture is linked in the video description. I think it's great. Give it a watch. The fundamental relationships and experiences of childhood often become lost to conscious recall, and the only way they can now be remembered is through acting them out in the here and now. Only these repetitions are unconscious. We do not know that in doing them, we relive a forgotten or repressed childhood memory. Our conscious mind still believes itself to be in control, an active and rational decision maker. If there appear to be patterns in our interpersonal or emotional life, the ego, who has only limited access to the unconscious, reasons that they are coincidental, not evidence of an unconscious process playing out. But let's examine this claim with the following example. Suppose a child grows up, having been repeatedly abandoned by their parents during times of emotional need or acute distress. As they reach adolescence and later adulthood, those instances of abandonment have been blurred and eventually are lost to conscious recall. But the memory lives on in the ways which that person, now an adult, structures their relationships with others. These relationships may be defined by pervasive feelings of insecurity, defensiveness, or repeated needs for validation in the face of chronic doubt. In acting this way, this person is consciously aware that they are not in a relationship with their parents in these moments, but it is the abandoning parent that this person expects and sometimes pulls their partner to be nonetheless. Over time, this repeated behavior might cause feelings of genuine resentment and distancing in their partner, who has become annoyed at being seen incongruously with how they view themselves. The partner ends the relationship, thereby confirming the fears of abandonment and reinforcing the need for the abandoned adult to repeat and check and defend with even more rigidity going forward. All the while, they might throw up their hands and say, "Why do I always date people like this?" while remaining ignorant of the unconscious determinants to this relationship's ending. Such is the power of the compulsion to repeat. A repressed experience does not wane in power. Rather, the repression increases its influence. For now it is no longer relegated to the past. Instead, it can be recreated again and again in the present, with other people and in other contexts completely disconnected from the experience's source, and all without conscious knowledge that a repetition is even taking place. In repression, the emotional lessons from the past are doomed to resurface in the present, and we become, as Benveniste so eloquently put it, nothing more than, quote, a relationship looking for another. Our conscious selves are attached to the idea that it is they who weigh the options, it is they who make the decisions. If an emotional reaction happens to occur, it is because of their perception of the events in front of them. Consciousness sits atop a boat, and because that boat has a steering wheel, it believes itself to be master of the deep ocean. But humans are more complicated than consciousness can allow itself to believe. And because of that, unconscious processes, those mental events which happen beyond the purview of consciousness, can flip that boat unexpectedly. The way to stop a repetition compulsion is the same way you try to keep a boat from getting swamped in a storm. You need to become aware of the waves which will sink you. Over the course of this video, I've been doing a lot of remembering and self-reflection off screen. I've been taking stock of my significant relationships, as well as of memories of past significant relationships, and I've been looking for interpersonal patterns common to them, in the hopes that doing so might help me to understand my own repetition of Zelda 2. And even though it surprised me, I think I found a psychological through-line after all. Receiving an education in psychology does not protect a person from their own leviathans lurking in the depths. It just provides that person with a light to explore. Psychotherapists use that light on others, and I think this is noble, important work. But if that light is never turned inwards, the risk of unintentionally pulling a patient into the therapist's unconscious repetitions arises, and that's not what anyone goes to therapy for. This video is entitled, "I Need You to Love Zelda 2. It's a silly title. I thought I titled this video, "I Need You to Love Zelda 2, instead of a more professional, "In Defense of Zelda 2, or a more provocative, "You were wrong about Zelda 2, because I thought, consciously, that a title which so clearly expressed hyperbolic longing was humorous. And maybe it is humorous. But what is a joke to the conscious is often sincere to the unconscious. The more I thought about it, the more I found myself possessed with a genuine need to make you, dear anonymous watcher of YouTube.biz, love Zelda 2 like I do. But why? In order to answer that, we need to stop looking at this game from the perspective of its merits and start looking at it psychologically. Zelda 2 has its selling points, and I think I've done a good job in laying them out. But that does not explain why it is this game that I keep coming back to, and it certainly doesn't explain why it is that I care so much about defending it. Zelda 2 is an ancient, primitive, frustrating, and unwelcoming game. To the die-hard fan, it can present a thrilling challenge. To the game designer, it has elements from which lessons can be learned, but that's about it, really. Intellectually, I know that. And intellectually, I know that, like everything else, my feelings about Zelda 2 have no real say in whether or not it will succumb to the sands of time and be forgotten. It will be. Everything is eventually, after all. But the deepest parts of the mind are not ruled by the intellect, even if intellect can momentarily suppress them for long enough to feel in control. The truth is, I need you to love Zelda 2 because when I talk about this game, I'm not talking about this game. I'm talking about my life and the important people in it. and I need that to feel significant. Okay, let me hit the brakes for a second. I know that what I said might prompt some eye rolls, and let me be clear. I have no desire to cease eyeballs from rolling if doing so brings you pleasure. Roll those eyes like you're bowling with them, for all I care. But the study of psychology often requires taking silly claims seriously. The human experience is our subject, after all, and in coming to grips with my own compulsion to repeat Zelda 2, that's just what I've needed to do. When Freud wrote about the psychoanalytic interpretation of dreams, he argued the importance of separating a dream's manifest content, the literal events of the dream itself, from its latent content, which can be understood as the underlying, often symbolic expression of the unconscious's wishes, wants, desires, and impulses. I'm going to apply the same ideas to our discussion of Zelda 2 for now. Let's put the manifest content of this game's synergistic leveling, its intriguing combat, and its sense of open adventure aside for a second. Let's instead look at the latent content behind my playing experience, and begin taking a peek at those memories I said that I was reflecting on. Let's see if we can't notice some parallels and generate some insight and make the unconscious conscious. Returning again to the ideas of Ben Veniste, when I am playing Zelda 2, what is the event I am looking to confirm via experience? What is the relationship I'm looking to recreate? Let's take a look. When I play Zelda 2, I'm dropped into an environment which has strict, often unforgiving expectations of me, and not meeting those expectations will, more often than not, result in annihilation and the end of the world. I'm also at the start severely disadvantaged in my ability to meet these expectations, but the game does not care about that. I can't change the game's difficulty or ask it to slow down. There's a goal given, and like it or not, I'm given the requirement to meet it. There's the initial anxiety as the game relentlessly grinds me down. There's the voice, small at first, but growing more insistent with each cumulative death, that perhaps I'm just not good enough to succeed in this environment. This voice whispers that it's okay to not be good enough at everything. It tells me that perhaps I should stop playing and accept the fact that success should not be worth this amount of frustration or fear. I repress that voice and learn to hate the part of me which speaks it. I do not stop playing. I gain some levels. The game becomes more difficult. I improve my strategy. I anticipate the cruelty. I'm always on edge, but rarely surprised. I'm always ready, but never in control. The part of me that I've learned to hate tells me that this might indicate that something is amiss. I ignore it. I notice an extra life in the swamp. I find where the magic and the heart containers are. This game's not so bad. It's not actually unfair. It's me that needs to keep improving. I die some more. The game does not hear my praise. The game does not relent. There are no limits. There are only costs. If I'm willing to pay the cost, I can succeed. Pay the cost, get the job. Pay the cost, get the degree. Pay the cost, learn the new skill. Pay the cost, get stronger. Pay the cost to gain approval. Pay the cost to gain approval. Pay the cost. Pay the cost. Pay the cost. It only costs time and your happiness, and when have those been valued by anyone? Certainly not by coach, not by friends, not by employers, not by supervisors, and not by this game. They've only ever been valued by that weak part of myself, which is content with quitting and with failure, and who continues, despite the clear evidence of my improvement and power, to say that none of this is worth the cost. This cost won't kill me. This game isn't the problem. I'm the problem. The game only wants me to get better. They're not bad people. They want the best for me. I need you to respect them because of what their approval has cost me. This game is amazing. You just need to look past what it does to me. I need it to matter that I've gotten better in an environment which humiliated me and shamed me and didn't care if I lived or died. I need you to love them. I need you to love Zelda 2. I need you to love Zelda 2. I need you to love Zelda 2! Alright, let's come up for some air. When I wrote all of that, I intended to take you through a logical and concise demonstration where I highlighted the similarities between my emotional experience playing Zelda 2 and the emotional experiences I've had with various authority figures in my life. I wanted to show you that while the game has its merits, the reason I'm drawn to it is because, on an unconscious level, it replicates the interpersonal interactions which have defined my sense of personhood. Zelda 2 is a good fit for me because when I play it, the parts of me which are used to being active are activated. I wanted to spend a couple of paragraphs on this, make the connections clear, and then bring it all on home without letting things get too enmeshed or too messy. But that's not what happened, obviously. This is the hardest part of the video for me to write and one of the main reasons for my delaying the completion of this script. Those pesky 500-odd words, where I needed to stop intellectualizing and confront the psychic reality of my compulsion to repeat this game, kept bringing up new resistances in me. The detached logic I wanted to use wasn't there, and the lines between the game and my memories kept blurring together. I wanted to separate the two, but my unconscious has no such duality. I don't repeat this game because it's secretly amazing, even though my ego wants it to be. I don't repeat this game because I enjoy it, even though I say that I do. I know that this game and my childhood experiences are two distinct entities. I know this as surely as I know anything intellectually. It would be convenient if human experience worked via the intellect, and we often structure society pretending that to be the case. But emotionally, no, that idea just doesn't hold water. Our current experience is filtered through and founded upon the lessons we've learned from previous ones. Nothing is ever really new, because our mind is always looking for ways to integrate the present with the past. It's how we anticipate, it's how we plan. Our sense of basic safety often depends on figuring out a way to make our current experience feel familiar in some way. Because despite everything else, if it feels familiar, it means that at least we survived it. This means that we're often drawn to people or places that are familiar to us, even if the familiar is not necessarily pleasant or helpful. The historically common psychoanalytic view is that our past experiences cause us to seek out actual people and places which in some way bear resemblance to experiences of the past. This certainly happens, but I think this explanation underplays the power of the mind and its ability to filter and shape our perceptions. Maybe a person really does have a pattern of entering into relationships with deceitful, selfish, or untrustworthy partners. This type of compulsion to repeat is seen often in the clinical world, but in my experience, it's not the only way repetition compulsion manifests. The other way we conflate present experiences with the past is not by seeking out people in situations which are similar to past ones, but instead by treating present experiences like they were past experiences. Let's look at Zelda 2 as an example. In my head, this game bears similarities to harsh, authoritarian experiences I've had through my life. Its unforgiving, harsh expectations have distinct analogs to the harsh expectations which have been placed on me by others, often from positions of power. I repeat this game, so says popular psychoanalytic interpretation, because of those real similarities. But this game isn't that way to everyone. My experience of it as harsh, fair, rewarding, or anything else is a function of me treating it as if it bore similarities to past relationships I had in my life. And the game, lacking sentience, did not resist my conceptualization of it. So of course it seemed to fit. People do this as well. The person with a relational pattern of finding deceitful, selfish, or untrustworthy partners could of course simply find themselves in bad romantic relationships, but they could also be treating all of their partners as if they were deceitful, selfish, or untrustworthy. Belief shapes reality, after all. In this way, the compulsion to repeat is sometimes less a pattern where we have the same experiences over and over again, but instead one where we fail to differentiate between what was then and what is now. Why am I bringing all of this up? As of this sentence, we are about 12,000 words deep into an analysis of a video game most people have not played. That's over 40 minutes of talk, and there must be a good reason for this because I certainly ain't getting monetized anytime soon. A part of me simply wanted to write about one of my favorite and least appreciated entries in the Zelda series. And in this, I think I've said all I wanted to say on the subject. I think Zelda 2 is more sophisticated than people give it credit for. I think it's a challenge. I want more people to give it a chance. But over the course of my defense of this game, I've also needed to look at why I so badly wanted to defend it in the first place. I needed to look at the game, yes, but I also needed to look at the person I became when I played it. This has, as I've mentioned, required me to consider some unpleasant memories, to bring some of my unconscious relational patterns to my own conscious awareness. I did this for a couple of reasons. First, of course, I needed to satisfy my own curiosity. But I also wanted to provide an example of the power that comes from increasing psychological insight, and how it has helped to improve my life. To that end, this video would be incomplete without my giving you an update as to how the process of examining Zelda 2 has changed my relationship with it. Simply put, I played a lot less now. I still stand by the points I've made defending it in this video, but I don't necessarily think that the world needs to love this game. For me, it stood in as a surrogate tormentor, when a tormentor of flesh and blood was not handy, and I loved the game for that. But I don't think it was particularly healthy for me to give it that love, just like it certainly wasn't healthy for me to repeat unsafe or painful relationship patterns in my life away from the game. I like to think that now I try to listen more to that little voice which was always present in the pain, which never gave up on its belief in my value as a person, that I did not and do not deserve to be made to feel unprepared or small or worthless. I'm in a pretty good spot now, psychologically speaking. I stand up for myself more, I disagree with others, I'm more willing to make someone else annoyed in order to preserve my own mental health. I trust that other people have the capacity to adapt to me, just as I have the capacity to adapt to them, and that a good relationship leaves both people feeling heard, supported, and free to respectfully differ, or even argue. I'm not perfect at this, and sometimes I still notice myself going into what I call Zelda 2 mode, where meeting expectations of others is all that matters, and the perception of others determines the fabric of my psychic reality. But I try not to. Now in my interactions with others, I'm aware of 2 tracks of being, for lack of a better word. There's my old way of being, which was given to me by the world, and my new way of being, which I am trying to cultivate within myself as a slow but consistent practice. This, to me, highlights what it means to have a psychotherapeutic experience at all. By itself, psychotherapy can't transform anyone into anyone else, but it can make a person more aware, and awareness can lead to more informed decisions, and more informed decisions can, little by little, help a person to walk a restorative path. And if that person stays on that path for long enough, they can heal, and might just find themselves to be transformed. I think that games and psychology are intertwined in ways which have yet to be adequately examined, and that's the reason I decided to create this channel. As a culture, we tend to view games from the assumption that they are static works, that they were created to give everyone who plays them the same experience, more or less. The game is the product, the player is the consumer of that product. But I don't think that this paints an accurate picture of how video games, as a medium, interface with the player. Every game is a conversation half spoken, an experience half completed. We, the players, are tasked with completing those conversations and experiences, and to that end, I think that the process is improved when we increase our levels of self-understanding. The question, what do I carry with me unseen, can provide answers to puzzling or difficult to understand motivations behind our social choices, and I think that the same can be said when we examine the choices we make to play, repeat, or dismiss a game. Not everyone who gives Zelda 2 a try will have the same social hangups that I do, nor will their perceptions be influenced by whatever messed up messages I've internalized about myself. Your playthrough of Zelda 2 will be just that, your playthrough, and it will be revealing in different, but no less important ways. In making this, my first ever video essay, I hope I've given you some reasons to give this game a chance, as well as some ways to notice how a game can tell you about yourself as much as it gives you a challenge. Until next time, this is SideQuest, where each digression is a progression. Thanks for watching. Okay, welcome to the unscripted post-interview banter section of this video, where I reveal to all gathered here who've watched this far that I don't know how to talk unless I'm reading from a script. So thanks so much for watching. I'm hoping that my earnestness in my voice makes up for any lack of eloquence that I'm displaying at this point in time. I just want to say personally, thank you so much for watching this far. It means it means a lot to me. I have no idea who this video's audience is, but if the magic of the algorithm has somehow put it on your screen and you liked it, consider subscribing, consider liking, consider sharing it with your friends, and consider joining me on Patreon, where you can get early access to new videos, behind-the-scenes content, and downloads of any original music that I make to record these videos. I'm just starting out, so you can get in on the bottom floor of this grand new adventure. Can you tell I'm good at self-promotion? So I'll just end by saying, hope you like this video. If you liked it, stick around. If you don't like it, hope you find something that you do like eventually, somewhere else. SideQuest out!